Hello, everybody. This is Michael Hollands for Sound of the Movies. Today I have the pleasure to be joined by Oscar nominated film editor Kevin Tent. Kevin, who is both a member as well as the acting president of the ACE, American Cinema Editors, has edited films such as Election, Girl Interrupted, Sideways, Blow, Nebraska, The Descendants, About Schmidt, The Holdovers, and many more. It is my pleasure to welcome Kevin Tent.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on my show. Thank you very much for taking a time out of your schedule. I really appreciate
My
that.
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Kevin, this is your eighth collaboration with Alexander Payne on the film called The Holdovers. And how do you manage to work together so well? How do the styles and the personalities match?
Well, that's personality wise, we match. We over all these years we've become very close. We're pals, and friends. So and working together, we enjoy working together and we work well together. We work hard, but we also have a good time while we're doing it. He's a fun-loving guy and like doesn't take things too seriously, and I'm kind of the same way. So personality-wise, we just mesh. Stylistically wise, people always say, "Oh, you have a certain style," and that kind of thing. But really, every film has its own style, and it kind of just organically happens on its own. Yeah, so I don't know if we like Holdovers has its unique style, and About Schmidt had a different style, and so Election had a different style. So the style kind of um, gets formed by the by the film itself.
You actually have been working together for decades, and I'm
Yeah,
curious.
crazy.
I'm curious as to how your collaboration has matured over the years.
Well, I guess we know each other really well, and we both have our radar up when we think something's working or not working, and um, we just kind of figure things out on our own. But he's such a good director. Really, the footage that comes in is the best quality. Like especially on the holdovers, he was really honed in on this one and super focused. And while they were shooting, so we were getting good footage, good dailies, and our how we worked. I mean, technically, how we worked. I don't know if it's interesting to people, but we used to do traditional editing where I would do an assembly while they were shooting, and then he would come in to the cutting room when he was done, and we would watch a cut and then start working off of that cut. But now we don't do that anymore. Now I'll make an assembly still, but we don't watch it. He doesn't watch it, or he'll watch pieces of it. Um, but we start from scratch. We start going through the dailies again, picking out our takes, building our scenes. So we have kind of a combo editor's assembly, director's cut, as opposed to just starting from an editor's assembly. So it takes a little longer for us to do that, but um, he he comes to the dailies fresh because he doesn't watch dailies anymore when during shooting. So he just is there on the set, and then when he comes back to the cutting room, he watches them fresh for the first time, and that's good for him. And by that at that point, since I've cut had a cut of the movie, I know the dailies fairly well too. So we're both kind of on a level playing field when we get to it.
Kevin, what do you think is the big strength of an Alexander Payne film?
So many things. First of all, his the world he creates is really convincing. That's what he has so many gifts as a director, but like one of the things that I'm always impressed with, like the the world that these stories take place in seems very authentic. It seems like you completely believe that this movie took place at this school in the on the east coast of Massachusetts or east coast of the states. Um, you'd never doubt it. And the same thing with like the Descendants. That feels really authentic. It feels like you're in Hawaii. And same thing with like Sideways. All his movies, you feel like you're really in those places. I think that helps everything. Like it helps with the actors. They feel comfortable in those places too, so that they kind of tap into that, and then their performances are reinforced are are enhanced by that. Um, so that's one of the things he's so good at, and he's so good at his characters. He loves all his characters, warts and all, and he gets the actors to just do great job. He's super patient and very generous, and those are just a few of his gifts as a director.
His films have lots of great qualities, and I've just recently rewatched quite a few of his, about Schmidt, and also, of course, The Holdovers and Sideways and The Descendants. So he has a really clear vision, I think, and his films often deal with a very serious story. There is also a certain element of humor
Yeah,
to it,
yeah,
dark humor, sarcasm also, especially also in Sideways. So there
yeah,
is a lot going on. So it's
right,
not comedy per se. The
right,
films deal with unique characters in unique situations, and that's
yeah.
what I think also sets him apart as a filmmaker.
Right. I totally agree. I totally agree. Yeah. That's the other, yeah. And his screenplays are always have that kind of those elements in it. But yeah. And I think too, the comedy comes out so often out of the drama when people are in real life, when you're stressed out and then something funny happens, it's kind of funny and you're just like, what the heck just happened? So that's like real life. And I think that's what he's always kind of looking for too. But yeah, yeah, that was well put. That's how one of his strengths in his storytelling.
The Holdovers takes place in the 1970s, actually, and I'm curious which decade of filmmaking has had the biggest impact on you personally.
Yeah, well, Alexander for sure, that era of films. He grew up, we both were about the same age. And I didn't grow up with those films in the 70s per se. Some of them I did, but like when I got a little older in my 20s, then I started going back and looking at some of those, some of the great movies like, Paper Moon and Being There and some of those. So those became big influences on me, but I probably saw them 10 years after they were out. Because when I was a young person where I grew up, there was only I didn't, I went to the movies, but I didn't really study them or anything like that. I just kind of went to ones that were being released at that time. But there were some good ones. But I didn't see I never saw Being There until I was older, or in my 20s. Um, but and that for sure for Alexander, who is a film nerd. Let's just call it what it is. Um, uh, he um, he loves that era of American film. He thinks that's the best, films were the best, have not been better since. So that's where he watches stuff. So he was definitely influenced by it.
What was a pivotal standout moment of the Holdovers which may have posed a big challenge in terms of storytelling or even pacing?
Yeah. So so we talked about before how he gets such great performances out of his actors. So a lot of our scenes, he really lets them take time to get to these great performances. And sometimes we have to, in the editing room, try to condense and pace up internally within scenes, the rhythm and overall pace of the film and stuff like that. So probably our biggest challenge is condensing, like getting the movie down to a couple hours. And that, but that's normal, I think, for most filmmakers. And on the Holdovers, I'd say that was our biggest challenge, like trying to get the movie down to a couple hours, you know. I think the first cut was 2 hours and like 45 minutes or something like that. And a lot of it was internal tightening, and then we dropped certain scenes here and there and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, that was probably the biggest challenge.
Right? How do you know a scene doesn't quite work and you eventually have to recut it? Because I think it can be so challenging to go through the dailies and the enormous amount of footage, and you see all of those wonderful performances, and you have so many takes of those performances and the story and how it unfolds. So how do you actually determine that personally?
Personally, I it's all how if I believe a performance that I connect with it, and a lot of times it's my first impressions. Like if I watch 3 or 4 takes of something that comes in fresh, I'm like, oh my God, that reaction's great. That look right there is perfect. Oh, I love the delivery of that line, but it's better in this take. So I start mentally kind of seeing where what my highlight reel would be. And then I take all those little pieces, we work on the Avid. So a lot of times I'll just start lining things up in the timeline, everything. Even if I hear like a door close that sounds really good, I'll grab it and I'll throw it in the timeline because I'll go, oh, I'm going to need that later at some point. So I wind up getting for a scene a whole bunch of stuff, like all cut up and chopped up. And then I go back and go, this is the best take of this. This take is also good. And if I stay here, I could, extend it and the next line could be pre-lapped and, all kind of stuff like that. So um, you just kind of go through it. And then when you recut, we are working the same thing when we're working with Alexander. When we recut, then we go back and we go, you know what? It's not working. Maybe we should get out of the scene here. Maybe we should put that back the scene how it was before so that it transitions better into the next scene. So we're always kind of, you know, constantly changing and cutting. And if you're curious too about like how do you keep perspective, also we screen for people a lot. So a lot of times when we start getting a cut together and we have like a full cut of the movie, we screen for like even small groups, like 6 to 8 people. We'll screen every week and a half to 2 weeks, and that's a really good. That's a real refresher in getting your perspective back because you can feel the people watching the audience watching it going, oh no, that's not quite working, or they're getting impatient, that kind of thing. So um, that's a big help.
So screenings obviously can offer you a big help, but sometimes I think it can also be perhaps a bit distracting depending on the feedback you get, and maybe you have some conflicting opinions. So,
Always.
and on the holdovers, did you actually trim down or even cut certain scenes completely only to put them back in eventually because you realized, maybe we need the footage?
Yes, that has happened, and I'm trying to remember if specifically it happened in the holdovers, but that happens all the time where you're like, let's try it without this scene and see if it works, and then you're like, oh, you know what, that doesn't quite work, or we miss something in the character development or something like that, so we need to go back for that. So sometimes plot wise, you don't need something, and you're like, okay, yeah, plot wise, we don't need this scene, it doesn't do anything, but character wise, it's important to have. For here's a holdover, for instance. We didn't drop it ever, but we discussed it because you discuss everything as a drop in it while you're cutting. Every to me, I'm always like, what if we just lose this scene? Just to get the brain thinking and you know just to keep the conversation going on things because you never know where it'll lead you. But there's a scene where Angus and the little boy Park, uh, he wets his bed. That scene, we were like, plot wise, we don't really need that scene. It's great for the little boy for him, but really character wise, it was such an important moment for Angus because it showed he was empathetic and sympathetic and actually a nice kid, even though he kind of came off as an obnoxious kid for most of the movie so far. You're like, oh, you know what? That's really touching that he's going to, protect the boy and clean the sheets in the morning. And, so um, we wound up obviously keeping that scene, but it was discussed at one point. We could lose that and it wouldn't probably hurt the movie too bad, but it would hurt his character. So we kept it in there.
Editing obviously is one of the most important aspects of any movie, and it should never ever be neglected in terms of telling a story, in terms of enhancing an actor's performance, in terms of simply getting it right and deliver an exciting movie, a cohesive story. When can a wrong cut or simply a sequence of wrong edits hurt a film severely, and how would you fix it?
So how about that? The scene I just talked about. If we had lost that scene, plot wise, like I said, it could have survived, but it would have been bad for his character. And really, we have a movie built on characters. So, you know, had we dropped that, that would have been the movie wouldn't have been as good. So I think what you do is while you're cutting, you never want to cut too deeply that you hurt the movie. And I think that was a challenge. That was our biggest challenge for the holdovers because it's leisurely paced. I don't want to say it's slowly paced, but it takes its time. And Alexander's always pushing for it to take time so that people can absorb things because things go so fast these days. And I'm always worried, oh, audiences, uh, you know, their patience is less than it ever's been. So I'm always like, we should keep things going so we don't lose their attention. But we always kind of, that's one of our battles in the cutting room. He wants it a little longer. I'm like, oh man, we should keep it tight here. And we go back and forth. But I think we get to a good place in the middle where it's the audience has time to absorb stuff emotionally, and yet it's still moving along, so they don't lose their patience, and we don't lose them.
What was your personal takeaway from this story, also in terms of thought provoking impulses? Because I think the film offers so many interesting characters, and also especially Paul Giamatti's character, for instance, and what they go
Yeah,
through and how the whole story unfolds at the end.
yeah. I loved how really, I mean, honestly, we have a great script, and David Hemmingson wrote a terrific screenplay, and with Alexander. But I love there's certain things I love how Paul's character is slowly revealed. It's really impressive how it comes. You learn about him more and more the more time you spend in the movie, and you build up your empathy and sympathy for him. You know, you find out you're like, did he run away? And then no, he got a scholarship at the school. So wait, he graduated from the high school and he still teaches there as an older guy. That's kind of you're like, that's unusual. Then you find out that he got kicked out of Harvard, and then you find out that eventually his father beat him when he was a kid. You're like, oh my God, no wonder why he's kind of this sort of damaged goods um, at the school. So I love how that is so subtly revealed in the movie. Um, and yeah, I think he's a great character. He's, I mean, I always liked him right from the beginning. I was always like, oh, he's funny. He's a hard ass, but you know, he's a good teacher.
Kevin, does music actually help you along the way when it comes to editing? Do you prefer a cut with no music? Do you work with the music editor to select certain scenes which might help you with music?
Absolutely. I work with music. I'm the kind of editor that likes cutting with music. Like I try to bring it in early on. If I can hear something that works in the scenes, I'll bring it on. The music in the holdovers was challenging in some ways because I couldn't really hear what it would be like. Like I sometimes when I'm cutting, a score will pop in my head and I go, oh, I could use that score here that I know and I've used before. It's for temp. And so, but on this one, I really couldn't hear what it would be. And Mindy Elliott, who is our longtime assistant editor on since the Descendants with Alexander, she imported an old record called the Swingle Singers, and which was a cappella Christmas music. And when she brought that into the Avid, we started using that, and it became a thematic thing that we used throughout. So it was wonderful. So that was one thing in the music, and then we worked really closely with Richard Ford, who's been also the music editor for Alexander's films since Election, and he's a genius, and he he started when he came on board. Then he started giving us lots of material and stuff like that to cut with. And we had worked with Mark Orton on Nebraska, and so he started feeding us some cues that he thought might work for this movie from Mark's library of music. So yeah, we work really music's, and then the other element that we had is with the songs, the '60s songs, which were so fun, or '70s songs. And that's always a fun process, but also a frustrating process because you get one that you love and you get it in there and everyone gets used to it and everyone thinks it works great. And then you find out it costs $100,000. So you're like, okay, we can't license that music. That's a big drag. And then you got to find replacements. And it's always a big drama, the music.
The film certainly has a very unique look, and it's so obviously reminiscent of films of the 70s and also of the late 70s, also early 80s. And please help me out here because I haven't had the chance yet to talk to Alexander actually about the film. But was it shot digitally entirely?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And Eigel Berld, who did just such a beautiful job on it. He's just such a great DP. But he said a funny thing at one of the Q&As, or it was actually a perfect thing, because they were always approaching it like, what would they do in 1970 to shoot this movie? And Eigel said, we would have, because it was the least expensive, shot on digital. That would what if it was a low budget film, which this was supposed to be, and it was, they would have used what they could have to shoot the film. So they would have shot on digital. So, I have no problem with it. I think it's great because, you know, they can just keep on shooting. They don't have to worry about reloading and, all that kind of stuff. They can just let takes go and it's all pretty great. And Alexander likes it too, I think, because the cameras are smaller. They can get inside the cars and, we can do everything. So, and then in post, we just added, there's the technology's gotten so good. We just added filmic elements like negative dirt, positive dirt, a little weave in the titles to make it look like it was being projected. Um, or shot on film. So
There are simply no limits today, and also in terms of making it look like it was actually shot on vintage material, and also in terms of the editing techniques that were used in the 70s.
yeah. Yes, totally. The only thing we didn't add changeover marks, which, when they used to have the reels change in the projector. So we didn't add those. We talked about it, but we thought we basically established it early so people had the feel, and then we really kind of didn't want to be distracting with it. But there's still like negative and positive dirt showing up throughout the movie, but we didn't get crazy on it.
Kevin, is there anything else you would like to add about this film, The Holdovers, about your collaboration with Alexander Payne, and about the upcoming Academy Awards? Because obviously you have been nominated again.
Yeah. Well, no, I just say that I'm really proud of the movie and I'm thrilled that people are responding to it. It's always fun to work with Alexander and we worked hard, but it wasn't an extremely difficult film or anything like that. And it went together well. And how it's been received has just been icing on the cake. It's been wonderful. So I guess that's all I can say. And I hope more people see it and I hope they like it.
I think it was one of the big highlights of 2023, and it has been nominated for 5 Academy Awards, if I'm not mistaken. So
That's right. Yeah.
I really hope that it will get the acknowledgement and the recognition that it deserves, because I think you really did a great job, and your work with Alexander has been exemplary. His films really stand out because in terms of storytelling and what films can do and should do without, let's say, quote unquote, an abundance of special effects, and in terms of really focusing on storytelling, it's really a big highlight also for me personally. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope, yeah, from your lips to the film god's ears, let's hope that they hear you. But
Let
thank you very much. That's really sweet.
Kevin, I would like to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. I had a blast talking to you. I thought it was a great conversation, and I hope you
Yes,
enjoyed it as well.
I did. I totally did. Michael, anytime. Hit me up anytime.
Great. Thank you. Take
Okay.
care, stay safe, stay healthy, and good luck at the Academy Awards, Kevin.
Thanks so much, Michael. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.